Hello ladies and gentlemen, this is Blue Maxima, and I'm here checking out Lost Judgment. This is from Chapter 4 of the game, this gameplay footage, but I did make it through Chapter 5 before I stopped to record this commentary. It is also playing on PlayStation 5, but on the normal performance setting, which is weird for a game on the PlayStation 5 for its normal performance setting to be 1080p 60. Or 1440p 60 or whatever. I'm only playing this on a 1080p monitor, so that's all that matters to me. It looks 1080p. And you can turn on Prefer Resolution as a performance mode, but my god, does it drop the frame rate into something like the low 20s. It's unbearable. I don't know how you'd be able to play through the game at that kind of resolution. It's so bad. And frame rate, I should really say. With that said, yeah, let's talk about Lost Judgment. Now, the thing about Lost Judgment, in comparison to Yakuza 7, which thoroughly changed the way the franchise works, and ended up with me hating it by the end of the game, Lost Judgment is very iterative. To the point where if you put the gameplay of these two games side by side, Judgment and Lost Judgment, the two would be nearly indistinguishable from each other. There's so little that's actively changed about the way this series works. There is some new stuff, don't get me wrong, there is a fair amount of new things to do. But it's more Judgment. To the point where I'll just say right out, if you have played Judgment, if you have played any Yakuza that isn't 7, if you were disappointed in 7, Lost Judgment will appeal to you. But if you never liked Yakuza as a beat-em-up game, but only as the turn-based RPG, if you didn't like Judgment for whatever reason whatsoever, and I mean it, any reason that you didn't like Judgment, that's not going to have changed in Lost Judgment. There's a few things that they've taken out of Lost Judgment that make it better than Judgment, but it's still nothing that would make me say, this will change your mind if you didn't like Judgment. Because it really does feel like the same game. I was honestly feeling like I was going through the same hoops. Not all of them, but most of them. And that's worth pointing out before we get into it. So, it's another story about criminals. It digs into the seedier undertones of Japan. It digs into Japan's societal problems as a whole. It does manage to be really interesting about it. But it does, of course, have that Japanese way of doing things where it can be a bit drawn out. It can be a bit fluffy in the writing. It can be a bit just... what's the word I'm looking for? You know, how sometimes it feels like the game has to slap you in the face with this message when you figured it out. In both the case where, oh, I already know the answer to this puzzle, I just have to wait for them to let me pick that answer. Or I know the message that they're going for here, but they have to repeat it to me 2 or 3 times in 2 or 3 different situations before I really get the point. Yeah, Judgment still does that. Lost Judgment still does that. So, yeah. It's basically this, not so much the same plot. There are new characters, there are new conspiracies, there are new connections. But yeah, it feels almost the same as Judgment. So again, if you liked Judgment's plot, the way it twisted and turned, the way it introduced characters, the way that they were written, you will like Lost Judgment's version of these ideas. And if you didn't, you won't. And I know I'm repeating myself like these bloody games do sometimes, but I really just do have to drive it in. They're the bloody same. Ain't that something? But let's get on to talking about some more brass tacks stuff, like the combat, for example, because they have changed it up a bit, and in a few ways that really do make sense and actually do make the game better. But it still does feel like the same game in a few ways. So the newest thing that they've added in the combat is the new snake style. I think that's what it's called anyway. Basically, it's the green one. They did the Soul Sacrifice Delta thing, where you had the red, you had the blue, and now you've got the green. And the green is all about parrying, disarming, and doing the best new moves in the entire franchise. I don't know why it took them so long to come up with EX Surrender. So, if you're even remotely familiar with this series, you'll know that EX actions and heat actions are basically, I'm going to take this guy and beat the absolute piss out of him in a predetermined cutscene that looks absolutely brutal. This game finally adds the ability to attack scared enemies with EX actions that will cause their eyes to roll back in their head and they will pass out, and it's brilliant. Whether it be just you grabbing a guy's arm, putting it behind his back and forcing him to tap out, or doing the whole 1-inch punch thing right away from his face and causing him to just fall down. It's great. It's hilarious every time you do it, and I'm disappointed that they didn't come up with this idea earlier on. It's probably because the majority of this, well, the majority of the plot so far at least, is taking place around a school, and you do end up beating the fucking shit out of a bunch of school kids. So any opportunity to say, hey, I'm not beating the crap out of underage kids, is probably a good thing. But with that said though, it's not like the game has lost its sense of brutality. The EX actions are still great. The combat itself is still really free-flowing. And even though you have 3 styles that you switch between with 1 button on the D-pad, it's still nice and smooth. You can swap between them pretty much any time you want, and the game slows down so that you can just hammer away at the down D-pad button to make sure you get to the style you want without going over it, because it'll give you just enough slowdown to make it happen, which is fine by me. But there are plenty of other minor changes they've made to the combat as well. A couple of them being, in the open world, when you were fighting random groups of thugs, the police could come get you, but you'd have to wait in a fight for over a minute to actually have that happen. They just took it out in this game, which is good, because they didn't see the point. You've also got... come on, brain, work with me here. You've also got new kinds of enemies running around the place. So you've got purple dudes now, which will do tons of damage to you and actually have their own health bars down at the bottom of the screen, meaning that wandering around is a little bit more fruitful, especially if you run into the Novo Riche guys, who are the guys dressed in gold suits. They will beat you in 2 hits. I have not managed to beat one yet. I am playing on hard, I'm just pointing it out. But one of the bigger things they've done with beating random dudes in the street is the fact that they actually give you bonus points at the end of every fight now. For the amount of styles that you used, the ways that you've knocked them out, and a little bit of everything in between, right? Anything you can do, whether it be knocking out everybody with EX Surrender, getting 1 kill with all 3 of your styles, all of those sorts of things. You get bonus points every time that you beat up a group of them, which means that it's now actually worth your time to fight all the delinquents, or the thugs, or the Yakuza that you actually find in the street. Because with some of the actions you can get, and some of the skills that you can buy, you can actually massively increase the amount of points you get at the end of a fight. So you can end up getting 1000 SP in a game where a lot of the techniques cost somewhere in between 5 and 20,000, with only the really expensive ones being like 10% of them at most, going above that. So you can get a ton of EX points as you go. Get all of those done by like chapter 3, which isn't that hard because of the way this game spawns enemies, and it'll be worth your time fighting every single group of enemies you come across. So yeah, they absolutely make it worth it just to fight the regular guys now. And of course, there are the big old dungeons with tons of combat and tons of fun EX moves. I think I've done like 2 of them at this point, and they're both still pretty damn good. Nothing wrong with them at all. 2 or 3 actually, now that I think about it. So yeah, the combat still holds up. There's still plenty of unlockable moves, a fair amount of which I don't have yet, so I can't comment on that. And you still got the gauntlet outside of the game, which, once you've beaten the fights outside of the game, they'll send you items inside the game as well, so it's worth doing them right away and not leaving them to the very end. So yeah, as a result, combat is just a little bit better. Flows a bit more smoothly. Having the snake style gives you a few more things that you're capable of and some of the best EX moves in the series. And it's just the same combat. So as I was saying before, if you liked Judgment, Oh yeah, other thing I forgot to mention. Mortal wounds aren't a thing anymore. Finally! Finally! They were so much of a pain in the ass in the original Judgment. All it did was unnecessarily drain your health when you couldn't get out of the way of a certain attack. Now, the big guys just do this big flare-up, and then they throw an attack at you. But if you dodge at the right time, you can counter and get a fair amount of damage in. That's what they replaced it with, and I'm so happy that they've finally gotten rid of that bullshit, because, God, I just love it. I love the fact that I don't have to deal with that shit anymore. It also helps that they've actually rebalanced the skills a little bit as well. Like, you can't buy all of the health expansions right off the bat. It is still relatively easy to do so. You just need to get 3 skills in the 3 different styles in order to unlock all of the extra health bar stuff. But you're also not going to be maximizing out your health bar by Chapter 4 or something like that. So, you know, that's fine. I can still earn a decent amount of points anyway via making sure my battle bonuses are all topped up. So there you go. So yeah, combat is just generally improved. More stuff to do, less of the annoying stuff. Great. What about wandering around the open world and finding side quests and doing all of that stuff? Mostly improved, although it's really not helped out by the fact that you have to go around bloody Ijin Show again. Because yeah, I really didn't like Ijin Show in Yakuza 7, and I still don't like it that much. They have tuned it up a bit. It is a little bit more colorful. There are a couple of places they won't let you go anymore, like the infamous, well, it's not a soap land, it's like the prostitute house in Yakuza 7, where he threatens to throw all those tissues on top of all those protesters, where it's just blocked off. You can't go down that way anymore, and everywhere else does seem to be a little bit more colorful and a little bit more enjoyable to look at, which was one of my bigger problems with 7, but it's still an absolutely huge city with everything all spread out. They do try and fix this. And I will give them credit for trying, because they came up with a creative solution, and that's the skateboard. Because the skateboard lets you get around town a fair bit faster. It means that you don't have to spend as much money on taxis, but the problem is that the skateboard just doesn't work. It just doesn't work. I don't know why. So, the way the skateboard works is that while you're sprinting by pressing the X button to get you to sprint, if you hold it down, you'll get the skateboard out, you'll get on it, and you'll start going. And you have to tap the X button to accelerate in order to not go off the skateboard. But there are a lot of things that'll stop you. 1, pedestrians, fair enough. 2, sidewalks, a little bit annoying considering how many there are in Ijin Show. 3, nothing at all a lot of the time. For some reason, for the life of me, I could not figure out how to stay on the skateboard for a lengthy period of time. Because whether I try to take a turn, whether I'm just trying to go down a straight street, whether I'm just trying to like cross a road onto another road, but I'm passing onto a sidewalk that doesn't look like a sidewalk, I'll get off the skateboard and have to get back on it. And it's really bloody annoying when you've got these skateboarding points littered around that you have to go and pick up while you're on your skateboard as part of like the hundreds of side objectives that these games usually have. And you just can't do it because the game just won't let you stay on the skateboard for long enough. And if you get even remotely too close to something, you'll just pop off it and the thing will disappear and you won't be able to pick it up. It's so bloody annoying. Also, not to mention, if you're even remotely drunk, you will not be able to go in a straight line on the skateboard. Not even a little bit. You'll just go side to side, side to side, side to side all the time, even if you're at 1. Compare that to regular sprinting, which is like, if you're 2 below your maximum, nothing will happen. So even at alcohol level 6, you can run in a straight line just fine. As a result, I just found myself not wanting to use the skateboard much. You can even jump and grind on like ledges and stuff like that. But it's also really hard to make that happen because that often involves going onto a sidewalk, at which point you'll just immediately disembark from the skateboard. So it's just kind of a pain in the ass. Thankfully, everything else isn't too bad. They bring back the Twitter thing from the first game, but they use it a bit more dynamically. They give you keywords which let you look around the place and actually go to a place in order to get a new quest. You also get plenty of new little things to play around with. Your camera spends a lot more time in the limelight. You get to use a signal tracer to find certain things. You get to use a dog to sniff out new cases. And it all feels... well, it doesn't feel unscripted, but it's definitely a bit more refreshing than just looking at the map every single time you come out and the daytime's changed, looking for the side case things. But yeah, that's all neat. It's not amazing, but it does just, you know, freshen things up a little, right? Nothing particularly out of the ordinary with that. And of course, you do have taxis that you can still use to go around, and you can still access your taxis from pretty much anywhere thanks to your smartphone. And of course, side cases do pop up on the map from time to time. You can still get them from the Yokohama 99 detective office, and it works in the same way as it did in the last game, where there's just a bunch of them, and you unlock them over the course of the game. Nothing wrong with any of that, of course. It just gives you a bit more of a varied way to find these side quests. And one of my biggest problems with Yakuza 7 was that the side quests didn't have that much in the way of variety, and neither was their writing any good. Solved one of those problems at the very least. And again, I've finished most of the side quests in Yakuza 7, and I haven't done that in Lost Judgment yet. And Lost Judgment side quests are... well, let's just say there is more to them, because Lost Judgment has got more gameplay mechanics to fall back on. So, it is worth noting that the side quests here might not be that great over the course of the game, but there is still a fair bit more variety to them. And the writing is a fair bit better as well. I don't really have a problem with the writing in this one. The characters are more relatable. The situations are a little bit more interesting, and it's a little bit harder to figure out where the side quests are going to go, even when it's pretty obvious what's going on sometimes. And it's also just got more relatable characters. I've often found myself looking at a few of these side quests, like reading through them and being like, oh, that's a bit sad, I feel bad for this guy. More than a few times. And I can't recall ever feeling that way in 7 more than once. So, it's doing better on the writing of the side quests, for sure, so far. Whether or not it's going to be any better as it goes, well, I don't know. And there are, of course, side activities. Lots of side activities. Some of which I haven't gotten around to playing yet. But the thing is, a lot of them have been re-implemented from the original Judgment, but again, with one or two new things on top. Whether it be new levels and new layouts for, like, the Ijin Show of the Dead, or Izizaki of the Dead, or whatever it is they call it now. There's also the arcade games. I really have to question what made them choose the arcade games that they did. Now, correct me if I'm wrong on this one. Moto Raid, Virtua Fighter 5 Vinyl Showdown, Fantasy Zone and Space Harrier, and Super Hang-On were all in the original Judgment. The only new ones, as far as I'm aware, if you don't count Izizaki of the Dead, which really isn't new, is Sonic the Fighters and Fighting Vipers. And the only reason I really question, like, what's going on here is because when you've already got Virtua Fighter 5 Final Showdown, what's the point of adding Sonic the Fighters and Fighting Vipers? Two games that are not only worse, just merely due to their age more than their gameplay decisions, but play almost in the same way. They've got the same button layouts, they've got the same way of doing combos, and the only thing that's really different about them is their presentations, and therefore slight differences in the way that they play as a result. Like, Sonic the Fighters just feels fucking terrible. So I don't know what convinced them to do that. It is worth noting that they have included a Sega Master System, where they will give you, brain work with me on this one, they give you Alex Kidd and Miracle World to start with, but they've hidden like 8 other games throughout the place for you to find, and I will admit that I like it better than that really shitty Unity pinball machine that they had. But, again, I've only managed to find one other game, and I don't even remember what that one other game was. They have also added, They've also brought back Paradise VR, but they've added skills, which makes things more interesting. They've brought back drone racing, And admittedly, a bunch of the courses are actually kind of boring because Ijincho is a boring city and they didn't really have much to do with it. But when they bring it to the school and they start doing races in the school, that's when it starts getting interesting again. Lots of twists and turns. You actually need to slow down every now and again. Actually more fun. And there is, of course, a bunch of other ones I'm not getting to, like darts, baseball, golf. All of which work about the same way that you would expect. There is a dance minigame, which is alright. It's nothing to really write home about, except for the fact that it is way better than the dance minigame. Not the dance minigame, the button masher minigame in the cinema that was in Yakuza 7, just because it has way more to it and is actually potentially difficult. Not to mention it actually lets you start out on hard difficulty songs, which actually makes it a worthwhile challenge. What else is there? There is also technically school cases, but they're basically just side cases under a different name. So I won't go too deeply into them, but it's more mystery stuff, which allows me to get on to doing the whole detective thing. You know, walking around areas, investigating for evidence, things that are out of place. They've improved that by giving you the ability to hold the L2 button, which will often give you a hint as to what you're meant to be doing, which is nice. They've also improved how you talk to people, where you've got multiple selections to choose from. Where, remember how in the first game, where it used to give you, like, SP if you got it right the first time? They don't do that anymore. Thank God. They also don't do that in the selecting evidence thing either, which, again, thank God. And there's no, I don't think there's any, like, lives of that anymore either, so you can just pick whatever you need to if you just completely lost the plot because you just felt like you had a stroke, you're just having a really bad day, you just can't remember exactly what you were up to. You just go through all of them until you're put back on the right path, which is nice. Was it that, or was it another game that I played? I don't remember, but yeah. What? Either way, there's no penalty for failing anymore, which is nice. Chases have got a improvement where it actually splits into two paths and you need to pick the path that the guy actually went down. All the times that this has happened, it's been really obvious, but I imagine they'll really be testing you later on, and if you fall too far behind, you'll end up in a bad situation. And so chases are just a little bit more interesting right now, although they're still not massively interesting. And the one new thing that they've added is full-blown stealth sections, where you need to get through nice and quietly, throw coins to distract people, throw smoke bombs, choke out people. They're very scripted and entirely linear, but they're still enjoyable enough. They're a nice change of pace, considering the otherwise you'd be beating the crap out of a bunch of people all the time sort of things going on. And yeah, as a result, it's just slightly more enjoyable. Also, you get all the same old gadgets. You get your drone, you get your camera, you even get the dog to help you out. Which is nice, but I haven't actually had that much time with the dog. I don't even know if you can pet the dog yet. You can go and take the dog for a walk, but you can't pet the dog just by a button prompt or something like that. What else is there? I genuinely think that's it. I've talked about everything that's new over the top of regular Judgment. I've said already that it's basically the same game as Judgment, but things have been improved. Some of them, as someone who played all the way through Judgment, oh yeah, one other thing I'll mention. There's no relationships around the open world anymore, so you don't have to be constantly going just out of radar range of a character and then going back in order to get their friend count up, right? You don't have to worry about that anymore, which is nice. But yeah, it's basically just in some ways streamlined, in some ways improved, in some ways expanded version of the original Judgment. With a new plot, some new minigames, but mostly just improvements on the old stuff. And again, if you like Judgment, you probably have already picked this one up. And if you don't like Judgment, or if you don't like the rulers in this game in general, or if you don't like just, you know, the Yakuza series and the way it does things, this isn't going to change your mind. And that's the long and the short of it. It's still an action RPG brawler with some detective elements. It can be a little bit over the top, but it does have about as good writing as the last game. It does still have that really satisfying combat. It still does have a big open world with plenty of interesting side cases, plenty of side activities, plenty of other things to do. It's still just really good at what it does. And yeah, I would recommend it. There you go. That's all I got. This has been Blue Maxima. I'll see you all next time.
Oi! Eh. なんだこれ、何やってんの？
ああ、おかえり。八神さんもなんか飲む？
ほらよ。くつろいでんね。まったく何の遠慮もなく。
もしかして俺のこと言ってる？
桑名はお前に用があって来てるんだぜ。まあ酒も将棋も嫌でやってるわけじゃねえがよ。
怪盗はどっちも強えな。歯ごたえがある。
俺に用事って何？
聞いたぜ八神さん。あんた三越場拾って例の大学生殺しを調べてんだって？半品リューマンに襲われたのもそのせいだったんだろ？俺にも一枚かませろよ。
悪いけど手は足りてんだ。
よその探偵が地元の殺し調べてんのにこの俺がのけもん？そいつはいただけないな。
手が止まってるよ。早く勝負を終わらせて会員になって。
地元に詳しい味方が必要だろ？俺なら偉人町の裏の裏まで案内できる。
でもお高いんでしょ？
初回は安くしといてもいい。よそのご同業に手柄独り占めされんのだけはごめんなんだよ。あんたが首を縦に振るまでここで頑張らせてもらう。
つくもと杉浦がいいんなら別にここは俺んちじゃないし。
僕はウェルカムですぞ。たまには賑やかなのもいいですな。
僕も全然。
居心地いいなこの事務所は。
あ、八神氏、ネットの自殺した息子さん
マジか。
見てくだ。教育実習生は過去にいじめ自殺を引き起こしたサイコパス三越場。江原は痴漢の皮をかぶった正義。 いろいろありますな。
これって結構騒ぎになってる？
今まさに誰かがこの話題に火をつけようとしてるといったところでしょうか。
その誰かってもしかして三越柴を殺したやつら？
そう判断するのはまだ早いかもしれませんがね。
そっか。
ただ気になる書き込みもあります。江原が裁判中三越柴の死体発見を言い当てたと。その件はこれまでゴシップ誌ですら取り上げてなかったのに。
そうだったんだ。
マスコミもお茶の間も痴漢で捕まったハレンチ警官を叩けるだけ叩けた。それでもうニュースとして旬が終わったんでしょう。後の裁判でどんなやり取りがあろうと気に留められません。
だからそういう話に俺も混ぜてくれって。三越柴を殺したのは複数犯なのか？そんなヤバいのがこの町で野放しになってんのかよ。
もう2ヶ月前の話だ。今この町にいるとは限らないし、今日も偉人町は平和だったろ？外からだ。
半品リューマン、また白面だ。
行くぞターボ。
お先に。
やるね。
何度も逃がすか。逃がすか。なんかここってはめられた？
安心しな。命まで取れとは言われてね。
じゃあなんで仮面取っちゃうんだよ。
この先お前が偉人町に来ることは二度とないからだ。俺はテッソー、半品リューマンじゃ幹部候補ってことになってる。この 間はうちのもんが世話になったらしいな。
俺を背中から不意打ちしてきたあいつらのこ
あん時下手に抵抗しなきゃちょっと痛い思いするだけで済んだのによ。
と。あんたらへの依頼は誰からだ？
組織の上が受けてきた仕事なんでね。俺らは雇い主が誰かなんざ聞きもしないし興味もねえ。ただ腕の立つ探偵を痛めつけるってのは楽しめそうだ。お前ら手出すな。まずは噂通りか。俺が味見してやる。楽しもうぜ。やがれ。
出さないんじゃなかった？遅かったんじゃないの海藤さん。
ああ、すまねえ。こいつら結構手強くてな。
おい、いいから逃げるぞ。こんなところにいたら命がいくつあっても足りねえ。
でもさ、つくもんとこの窓は誰に弁償させんだ？
いや、分かった、俺が払うから早く逃げるぞ。
ならオッケー。からでも来な。
タボ、道は開けたぞ。
今行く。 今行く。からでも来な。もう帰っていいのかな。
八神。
ああ、名前なんだっけ。テッソ。
噂以上じゃねえか。この人数相手に大したもんだ。褒めてやるよ。
どうも。褒められついでにさ、あんたらの雇い主のことを教えてくんない？
言ったろ。あいにくそんなもんには興味がない。
じゃあせめて次また同じ依頼が来たら断ってくれよ。
お前がこの町を出ていけば済むことだ。同じ依頼が来たらそん時は当然引き受ける。でも今日はもう行っていい。
おい、うまいことやったな。あの鉄装ってのは若い連中に人望があるんだ。あんたあいつに一目置かれたぞ。
じゃあもうハンピン・ニューマンは安全。
まあそうとは言い切れねえか。他にも若いリーダーはいるし。いやでもいきなり背中から襲ってくるようなことはもうないんじゃねえか。それだけでもよしとしようや。
おう、ほんの少しだろうが前には進んだ。
スクモんとこに戻ろうか。あいつの事務所にはとんだとばっちりだったな。
どうした急に。